Completing a half Ironman made me rich, and it might do the same for you. Like most triathletes, I've always had a passion for fitness, and even though I was born immobile, I still wanted to do sports and participate and just be like everyone else. I was in the top 0.5% in fitness, but I couldn't say the same for other areas of my life. After finishing my first half Ironman, I went on to build my 7-figure company, Optimobility. And if you are anything like this, a previous athlete, now turned business owner, well, this video is for you. By the end of this video, you'll see the parallels between training and making money. When I was growing up, from as far as I can remember, I always had problems with my legs. In terms, more specifically, my right leg, I was born with a condition where I couldn't walk for the first 5 years of my life due to botched operations. And from the moment I could remember, I was always doing at least 2 to 4 hours of rigorous physiotherapy every single week. And this gave me the mindset in sports and whenever I was trying to adhere or be like other kids to just keep up. I tried to not let my foot affect me or limit me in terms of my running and the abilities to make friends at a young age. The thing that drove me to push through all my operations and limitations was honestly that I never really found a ceiling with the restoration process of my foot. Even though I had gone through immense surgeries, I never really noticed that they were holding me back from achieving a certain level of fitness. Yeah, it was really hard on the leg and it didn't feel good, but at the end of the day, if I was going to get from point A to point B in a race or just while playing tag or basketball, I would find a way to do it. That obsession quickly took over when I was around 11 years old and I started competing in track events for my local elementary school. That went into volleyball and basketball in high school as I was tall, and although I couldn't do layups on my left side because of my right leg, I would just jump on the other leg. I would just jump off of the other leg on the wrong side, which wasn't technically correct for basketball, but I made it work. And after high school, I went through a breakup and I had to reinvent myself as I was ultimately 150 pounds and super skinny and super lanky. So I put on around 80 pounds of lean mass and got up to 230 pounds. And in the gym, I didn't really notice any limitations with my foot, as opposed to just some size differences when I was doing leg day, as well as some strength differences on the weaker side. And the thing that pushed me to get over all the surgeries and the operations and the things that were holding me back were ultimately that I had no other reason to just victimize myself. I was still able to get things done and I noticed that I was improving. So as long as I was improving and I noticed that I could keep up with people at that level, I had no reason to just sit back and watch the show. I wanted to be a part of it. And ultimately I turned that into a story. I explained what happened with my foot, and by having the credibility firsthand that I've done half Ironman races and bike racing and natural bodybuilding, it showcases an important story and an important inspiration piece that if I can do it with so many limitations pre-imposed on me, then why can't you? And that sort of obsession didn't initially translate into business because much like fitness initially, I failed for 3-4 years when I first started weight training at 16 because I was missing the basics of proper recovery and proper fueling, even though I was going to the gym 5 or 6 times a week. And ultimately, going into Ironman in 2019, right before I started my business, I didn't really assume that it would be the exact same carryover into business, as I knew it would be really hard. I had done one thing for so long, which is fitness, and I'd just gone all in on that kind of character skill tree, and I'd immersed myself in that world coming from a multitude of different types of athletic endeavors. But I knew, and there was a gaping hole, and that hole was in my bank account and in my finances, and that was something that I had to take at the forefront even though it was uncomfortable. So I really made sure that I was locked in to my goal in business and I was able to channel all my energy into figuring out my income situation as opposed to just doing another Ironman or doing another event, as ultimately that wouldn't fix the fact, which was I needed to find a sustainable source of income that didn't take up all of my time. And there were a couple of areas that felt untrained compared to my fitness, which was my communication ability, the ability of selling myself, selling my product, networking, figuring out what good service delivery is, what bad service delivery is, customer experience, and thousands of other topics that predominantly I learned by being in business now for 3 to 4 years. I realized that there's a different type of discipline when it comes down to business than there is in fitness. With fitness, you can show up every single day and kind of brute force it like a blue collar worker. A landscaper, if they just show up and they have to clean up the same mess over and over again, well, they will because they'll get paid for that. So I had to really be granular about there being a fine line between slaving away for money versus finding a smart and intricate mechanism that I could deploy for people that didn't necessarily use that much energy. And when I was working more, I was making a lot less money compared to now. And that was the exact moment where I realized I couldn't outwork a bad strategy or a bad product. If I was selling myself short, or if I was not charging enough, I would be tied into working and fulfilling on expectations that I set and cash that I collected for somebody. Whereas in fitness, I can just get up and go home, or get up and go away from the objective or the task at hand, because that was ultimately all on my plate and my decision making. I was lucky, however, because I didn't really have the biggest ego coming into business, as all the sports that I had done were mainly solitary sports. Ironman, triathlon, bodybuilding, all of these things involved one person, and they involved myself. And because I was heavy when I was competing, I was around 210 pounds. By no means was I pro or getting paid for these events. They were just physical endeavors that I deemed to be extreme or hard that I did for myself to build up that credibility, build up that story, and ultimately showcase some sort of inspiration with my personal brand. And this is exactly what the half Ironman taught me. I vividly remember the swim and the bike going perfectly. I had a 1 minute 30 second per 100-meter swim, which isn't bad. And I did the bike with an average speed of around 37, it was around 34 to 37 kilometers an hour. And when I started the run, I was flying at 420 and 425 per kilometer for the first 3K. But I started suffering at around the 5K mark because I got 3 nick-sized blisters on my feet that were really impeding the ability for me to step properly on the loose terrain. And that discomfort I felt throughout the entire race. I had another 17 kilometers to go until I was done. And ultimately, I just pushed through it knowing that I probably wouldn't be able to walk right after the event, even though I wanted to quit a multitude of times. And that was a low point. And I knew that the only thing that I had to do at the end of the day was just put one foot in front of the other and not overthink my problems or the situation. Because if I started spinning or spiraling in that moment and in that situation, all of the work and all the people supporting me at that moment in time would have been extremely disappointed. And I knew that subconsciously that disappointment would be ultimately weighed on my shoulders. And I just couldn't live with that. I couldn't live with putting in work just to show up on race day and not have the event go well for me. And finishing that race made me realize just the enormity of the mental strength that it takes to complete something. The body will throw in the towel long before the mind throws in the towel. And that sort of resilience and grit and that stupid just continuing to show up every single day mentality was ingrained in my life forever. I wasn't talented and I wasn't the fastest or the strongest person there on the run or on the bike, but I just was brute at showing up. And by showing up, I actually rewrote physical limitations that should have never deemed me eligible for an event like racing a half Ironman and placing 12th in my age group for my first event. Endurance sport is similar to business in this way, where it is very much so a mental game. But I don't think people understand the enormity of what it means for it to be a mental game. Some months you'll hit record highs, and other months you'll hit record lows. And some days you'll wake up in those record lows and not know what the problem is, and if that has to do with your product, your marketing, customer satisfaction, etc. And it's up to you to figure that out, much like it is in a race when your stomach's not feeling good or you have giant blisters on your feet. In that moment, it's up to you to figure it out. And being in that zone and being in that discomfort state emphasizes one thing very heavily, and that's our survival mechanics. Our ego wants to survive. It wants to be comfortable. It wants to guarantee its survival. And by pushing it in those states of high intensive fitness or high intensive business, it comes out as risk. And that risk is truly where life is worth living. If I hadn't gone through that risk or that Ironman, I wouldn't be where I am today, nor would I be so successful in business at a somewhat earlier stage. Obviously, there are people that are way more successful than me, but I do attribute a lot of my success to the sheer determination and grit and just the ability to show up for myself without really caring about what pre-imposed limitations were on me, whoever made fun of me when I was a kid with my leg, and all of the unsuccessful people that constantly told me I couldn't do it or mocked me before I realized and I became conscious with myself. And on race day, that training plan and the entire event was out the window. You just had to show up and perform. It's funny because there's a lot of other similarities, just like how plans fall flat on their face when it's time to show up and shut up. It's the exact same thing for pacing yourself. See, I hadn't trained my run nearly as much as I'd trained my bike and my swimming. I'd swam for 8 years and that was my job at the time as a lifeguard. And I'd biked a fair amount. I biked over 320 kilometers in a day. So doing 90 kilometers was nothing for that race. But I'd only done 3 half marathons and ran somewhat inconsistently at a 20-kilometer week volume, which wasn't nearly enough to get my feet ready with the sheer magnitude of what a uneven terrain would do to me after the bike and the swim. So I was negligent. I didn't prepare properly. I should have hired a coach that had done something like this before and that was able to assess my situation and could immediately point out what my weaknesses were. It's the same thing in business. Our biggest problem is often not what we're doing, but what we don't know what we're doing. Our biggest problem as business is not what we're doing, but it's what we're missing and the way that we're framing what we're doing to the current goal and subset of our problems. That's what makes businesses elite or subpar. And if you're watching this and you haven't done an Ironman, well, it doesn't really matter. Think of the highest level event that you've done, and that's your frame of reference for the amount of pain that you can withstand and challenge that you can use and translate that into a completely different dimension. And the one thing that I'd apply from endurance sports into business is just not letting your mind think that it's always at the end of the line. As long as you're imposing the proper systems behind your body and your mind with your fuel, performance, and recovery, you will have everything that you need on a good day or on any day to sustain your endurance. And just because your mind is spinning things off or it doesn't think that you can, you are more than capable to complete that endurance event. But your negligence and your discomfort and your inability to recognize that there's shit that you don't know about that is holding you back from that next level of yourself is the ultimate enemy here. So if you're feeling stuck in your business and you've never truly tested your limits, you have to make the correlation between you as the source of output and your business's source of output, because these are two fundamentally different things. And if you consistently optimize your business's output, but you never touch your own, you're missing on a completely revolutionary form of growth, energy, prosperity, and divine alignment by tapping into your output first and the systems behind what your mental limitations and constraints are. And if you'd like to learn more about my business Optimobility, how we save 40 to 60 hours per month for all of our clients and dial in these systems for them, check out the link below.